Welcome to Civil Coursify. Download the Android app and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that bell icon to get instant access for all the videos. Also follow us on Facebook as well as Telegram. The standoff between India and China in the Doklam area has snowballed into a crisis of sorts between the two Asian powerhouses. Such confrontation have not been witnessed between the two nations since the 2013 standoff. The Chinese media has been quick to reference the war of 1962 when the Chinese armed forces were successful in inflicting severe damage to the Indian forces, prompting Indian Defence Minister Arun Jaitley to say that the India of 2017 is very different from the India of 1962. The statement, however, failed to end the posturing from Beijing. Chinese state news agency The Global Times said that there could be a chance of war if the recent conflict between China and India is not handled properly, noting that China will resolutely defend its territory and safeguard the border. Are these just plain empty threats? Is China really gearing up for a war against India? Now, this brings us to the 5 reasons why China can't dare to attack India. Number 1. India's military strength. For decades now, the Chinese Communist Party has been diverting significant resources to expand and modernize the Chinese military. Although late, the Indian government too has stepped on the gas when it comes to military modernization. So, how do the two forces, two of the largest in the world, stack up against each other? Let us have a closer look. The defense budget for China has been way above India's budget. For China, it was $151 billion in 2017, whereas it was $51 billion for India in the same year. This is evident from the fact that the People's Liberation Army of China has 23,35,000 active personnel compared to 13,25,000 of the Indian Army. The reserve component of the Chinese army stands at 23 lakh, whereas for the Indian army it is 21 lakh 43,000, which makes the count at 46 lakh 35,000 for China and 34 lakh 68,000 for India. China has 2,955 aircrafts to power its air defense, whereas India has 2,102 aircrafts. China has 6,457 tanks, 1,710 self-propelled artillery, 6,246 towed artillery, and 1,770 multiple rocket launchers for combat on land, whereas India has 4,426 tanks, 290 self-propelled artillery, 7,414 towed artillery, and 292 multiple rocket launchers. When it comes to the Navy, China has 1 aircraft carrier, 51 frigates, 35 destroyers, 35 corvettes, and 220 patrol crafts, whereas India has 1 aircraft carrier, 14 frigates, 11 destroyers, 23 corvettes, and 139 patrol crafts. In the subsurface fleets, China has 7 nuclear and 60 conventional submarines, whereas India has 2 nuclear and 13 conventional submarines. China has 260 nuclear warheads compared to India's 110. Now, China has 3,000 cruise missiles and 13,000 ballistic missiles, whereas India has 400 cruise missiles and 5,000 ballistic missiles. Now, don't be bogged down by these numbers. Some people might think that these numbers show China's superiority in defense, and this could give nightmares to Indian armed forces. So, is it true? The answer is no. China has over 2,000 fighter and bomber aircrafts belonging to categories such as Jian, Jianhong, Chengdu, Hong 6, FC-17, Sukhoi 27 and Sukhoi 30 MKK. It has to be noted here that over 60% of these aircrafts are second and third generation aircrafts, and a large number of those may not even be combat ready. The Sukhoi 30 MKK aircraft, which is the premier fighter craft for China, is technologically much inferior compared to the Sukhoi 30 MKI version that Indian Air Force operates. Sukhoi 30 MKK can actively engage 2 targets simultaneously, whereas the Sukhoi 30 MKI, being a Generation 4.5 aircraft, can actively engage up to 20 different targets simultaneously. Besides these, India also operates over 380 UAVs that can perform various roles including missile attacks and bombings. Even though China has a larger number of nuclear weapons, the stockpile of both nations is enough to almost wipe out the other from its existence. So, do they even get the chance to use all of them? Think about it. Experts say that if India and China were to come to blows, the real war would be fought at sea. China imports large amounts of foreign oil, and two-thirds of that must pass through the Indian Ocean. India sits astride the sea lanes, providing China with energy. In the event of increased tensions, the Indian Navy could impose essentially a blockade on China of vital shipping from the Persian Gulf and Africa. Now, India has multiple entry points into Chinese territories through Afghanistan, Indian air bases at Farkhor and Aini in Tajikistan, along with Ladakh, Chumbi Valley near Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, and through its naval presence in South China Sea. Very recently, Indian Army General announced that Indian Army is now ready for a two and a half front war, that is, a simultaneous war on both its border against China and Pakistan, along with dealing with internal threats. He said that a new strike corps known as the 17th Strike Corps is being raised specifically for mountain warfare. Number 2. Trade relations. India is a huge market for Chinese goods with bilateral trade in 2016 of about $71.18 billion. China exports more goods to India than India does to China. The Chinese economy is heavily dependent on its exports, and degrading relations with one of its key trading partners could prove detrimental. If these two giants get involved in a war, most of the countries would be forced to take sides. India over the last few years has engaged its diaspora to great effect and has strengthened bilateral relations with most of the powerful nations of the world. Too bad for China. Number 3. China's slowing economy. In 2016, China grew at its slowest pace since 1990. In the first quarter of 2016, the country recorded a GDP growth of 6.7%. So, what exactly happened? There was a strong decline in manufacturing and construction output, the main drivers of China's growth until now. But a few other issues came into play, considering the three main ingredients for long term growth. The first one being labor, which is now declining as China has already peaked its population in 2012. The second is productivity, as China is catching up economically with the rest of the world and is approaching the innovation frontier. Leaps in productivity can no longer stem from knowledge transfers, but must increasingly be driven by domestic innovation. Now, the third one is capital. China's already high investment levels of around 50% of their GDP will be difficult to sustain in light of total debt having reached 237% of GDP, up from 148% at the end of 2007. Now, China, due to its trade surplus over the years, collected a whopping $3 trillion of Forex Reserves, which it invested in the US Treasury bonds. Due to the low returns, China had started diverting its forex reserves into projects like the One Belt One Road and Maritime Silk Route instead of the US Treasury bonds. Under the One Belt One Road initiative, China is expected to invest up to $1.3 trillion in infrastructure projects, which will connect China's industrial heartland to Western Europe via both land based as well as maritime transportation and communication networks. With a slowing economy and huge amount of money already invested in development projects, it is highly unlikely that China would dare to engage in a full-fledged war, as it might either push China one step ahead towards bankruptcy or halt the projects in between for years to come. Number 4. India's strategic ties with other countries. India over the last few years has strengthened strategic bilateral ties through Prime Minister state visits to various countries such as USA, Russia, Israel, Mongolia, Japan, South Korea, Gulf countries, and the Southeast Asian countries, which is enough to surround and pressurize China whenever needed. Number 5. South China Sea. China is very possessive about its claims over the South China Sea, where it is already facing resistance by Taiwan and the Southeast Asian countries, especially Philippines over Spratly Islands and Scarborough Shoal. The Hague Tribunal recently ruled against Chinese claims of the South China Sea and asked it to follow the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. China's involvement in a war with India will only escalate the South China Sea issue, with many countries joining India to contain China and stopping its meaningless claims over the water body, which is a key route for world trade. These were the various factors that would force China to think twice before attacking India. India cannot be underestimated for its military and diplomacy for sure. We would love to hear your point of view as well. So what are you waiting for? Just write it down in the comment section below. We hope you liked this video. So hit that like button, share it with others and subscribe to our channel for more such videos in future. Till then, take care.